And then when I arrived at the border, I was left to sit like just on my own without explanation. There wasn't somebody with the translation capability. So I was just left sitting on my own, presuming that it's because I'd messed up my visa that I was causing this kind of difficulty. But in fact, actually, I think the visa name was inconsequential. What actually the issue was letting me into the country by bicycle. Something that I had written to Saudi Tourist Information before setting out on my trip to confirm, I am a solo female cyclist. Am I literally allowed to travel on my own on a bicycle in Saudi Arabia?
Welcome to Seek Travel Ride, where we share the stories and experiences of people taking amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello everyone, I'm currently taking a little mini break from releasing new episodes of the podcast, and in the meantime I'm re-releasing some of my favourite conversations. This week I am stoked to be sharing the story of Helen Dainty, otherwise known as Hels on Wheels. My goodness, I caught up with Helen way back in September 2023. So take a little moment now and forgive maybe the raw sound of my audio from back then. But this conversation was absolutely magic for me. I remember being so energised speaking to Hels, who has been a long-term bike traveller now since 2016. Enjoy my conversation now with Hels, and I'll be back with new episodes in the weeks to come. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Helen Dainty. Helen refers to herself as a full-time global hobo and has cycled over 75,000 kilometres, pedalling her bike around numerous countries around the world. Her passion for travel has led her to developing a lifestyle, which means she's on an endless bicycle tour. She's unofficially the first woman to complete a solo crossing of Saudi Arabia and is currently in Egypt with plans to hopefully continue travelling through Africa. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Helen today and learning more about what it's like to live life in this manner and the experiences and knowledge gained from her vast bicycle travels. Helen, welcome to the show.
Hi. Wow. Thank you for that introduction. I feel quite special.
You are quite special. You should own it for sure. Helen, I have so many curious questions for you, and whether we get to answering them all, I'm not even sure in this amount of time that we are privileged to share with you. As someone who loves travel, who's passionate about travel and is curious about the world, I feel you already have so many answers that from places that you have been, but I'm really looking forward to delving into what this lifestyle you've carved out for yourself actually looks like and what the reality of full-time on the road means. But before we get into those details, a question which I start all my podcasts with, and I ask this of all my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yes, I guess I do. Yeah, well, I remember my dad teaching me how to ride a bike. I think it was yellow. Yeah, and we would go on like little bike trips together. Like for me, I think that in my memory, these are like we were climbing mountains. It was like impossible. I was like pushing my bike up these hills, and I remember my dad teaching me that like you should, try and build up a bit of speed on the down so you can that'll power you a little bit on the up. And I remember, these trips that we'd make in the West Midlands. And then recently, when I've been back in the West Midlands, I've taken like a cycling route along those same, like a roughly the same area. And like trying to imagine like 9-year-old me, like, was this the hill? Could this be the thing that I thought was like this unconquerable mountain? Is this slight rise that I'm like maybe dropping down 2 gears to do now? I'll never find the exact road, but I have very, very distinct memories of those first bike trips with my dad, yeah.
Oh, it's so special. And actually what you've said there really resonates with me because it's interesting. Earlier this year, I actually had a visit back to Australia and my parents still live in the family home there up in southeast Queensland. And I spent so many hours in my childhood riding my bike outside the confines of the family nature strip, which was where my mum used to want to pen me in. And I used to just do laps of our suburban street, which felt like it went for kilometres. But revisiting those places, like you said, you go back with an adult's lens of the world and this vast open space is so small, so different. It would be interesting if you were to sat down with 5-year-old you or 9-year-old you and the things you could talk about. But that sense of travel, the curiosity and stuff, when I look at what you've done, Helen, and where you've travelled to, and I mentioned it in my intro, 75,000 kilometres of bicycle touring, that almost does a disservice to what you've done because your travel adventures haven't really strictly been on a bicycle at all. They have been predominantly for the last years full time, but you've done some extensive travel. You've walked the Silk Road. You took a gap year of a world tour. So travel is obviously something that resonates deeply within you. Well, I would be correct to say, I imagine.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I've been living out of a backpack, you can say, for 19 years now, I calculated. So even when I was the most stationary, when I was living in Australia, I was there for 10 years. But even then, the majority of that time, I was working a job where I had no fixed address. The job was, like a FIFO job. So, friends' couches at the weekends, but I was accommodated in like different regional towns across Australia. So even at my most stationary, I was living out of a backpack. And this is why it's so easy for me to pick up and travel like each spring, or in the case of the Middle East, each autumn, because every time I've gone away, my possessions have reduced down and down and down until now, really, I have what's with me and I have half a backpack of gear in my parents' house. So because 19 years worth of setting out on adventures, your stuff necessarily reduces and reduces. And now it's just how I am. So I don't have that intimidating idea of like, oh, what shall I do with the house? What shall I do with all my furniture? Because I just haven't owned those things for like 19 years now.
Wow, you're like a living, breathing example of like that motivational quote statement you see of people saying collect experiences, not things. Like your life has been about experiences for almost 2 decades now.
Yeah.
And I guess that sort of takes me to the sort of thought there then, Helen, that perhaps transitioning to doing this full time, you've unconsciously been doing this for so long, even in your career life. As you said, when you had a sort of your most settled life, which was 10 years in Australia, you were still on the go all the time. And so perhaps it's been an easier transition than abruptly working a 9-to-5 corporate job, selling things up, and then all of a sudden having to make this adjustment. You've sort of just done this organically in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely been organic. Like there was the first year out, then something clicked on that year out. That was like 2004, 2005. I went and lived in Korea, which again was, stationary for a year, but was like, in an exotic, foreign, exciting new land. So that was still very travel-y for me. But yeah, incrementally, stage by stage by stage, it used to be like work for a year or two, travel for a year, work for a year, and until, gradually, incrementally now I'm just all but permanently on the road. Like I take European winters off, but yeah, effectively full time on the road for the last 6 or 7 years, you could say now, I think.
Far out. And you've chosen a bicycle now to do the vast amount of your travel. I mentioned there just briefly, you've done long through hikes. I mean, hiking the Silk Road is probably one of the biggest through hikes you could probably do, actually, short of continuing to walk all the way around the world. Why did you choose the bicycle as your way to experience travel then? And what shifted you away from hiking per se?
It was a bit of an accident, actually, because I was in Australia applying for my citizenship, and I'd already used up my last backpacking trip had been around South America, and I'd used very carefully like 362 days because you can't have more than a year overseas while you're applying for your citizenship. So I'd already used all that time, and I was stuck, in inverted commas, stuck in Australia. And like I said, I'd worked for a year or two. I was ready to travel, but I was necessarily having to stay in Australia. And I'd already backpacked around Australia. I'd already driven around Australia in a camper van. So like I have a literal bucket list in my notes app on my phone of like things that I want to achieve. And one of those things was to do like a long distance bike trip. And the other, right next to it, just by chance, right next to it on the list was to go and see, there was parts of Australia I hadn't been able to see in my beloved Toyota Tarago because the suspension was so poor. So things like the Gibb River Road, Wolf Creek Crater, Cape York, but anyway, a bunch of places that my camper van just couldn't have tolerated. And yeah, these two things were sitting right beside each other. And I started to wonder, I wonder if I could do a bike trip to see these things in Australia. I think I briefly considered like a 4-wheel drive, and I just didn't have the sort of time, or I didn't have the money, I should say, for that. So I began wondering if you could cycle along these dirt roads in Australia. And I found like a really useful website. It's called Cycle Trails Australia, and it has 15 like epic dirt road adventures. You know, the Tanami, the Mundabindi, is it? Oodnadatta. So you can piece together, and that's how I sort of pieced together my trip around Australia. I needed a thing to do that wasn't work. I needed to go for an adventure, and I needed to do it cost effectively. And so, yeah, I hatched this plan to cycle around Australia, which at the time I literally didn't even know if that was a feasible thing. And yeah, the rest is history.
Can I say, as an Australian, and I should actually preface this by saying I myself have not visited the areas that you have visited there. Like, I know without a doubt you've seen more of my own country than I have.
It's normal.
Yeah, I imagine with most people that you speak with. I don't even know if baptism of fire is correct, but what a cycle tour to choose, because there's cycling across Australia and there's cycling across Australia and around Australia, and the tracks that you're mentioning there, you know, Tanami, Oodnadatta, Gibb River Road, Mundabindi, as you quite rightly said, your lovely Toyota Tarago wouldn't sustain you on a track like this. You'd need a pretty rugged four-wheel drive, and even some of those areas of four-wheel drive would definitely struggle. So if I think about a bicycle tour to take, that's probably going to be throwing you really into the deep end of the physical sort of things you're going to face. Would I be right to say that that would have been such a deep end to thrust yourself into? I'm just thinking of the washboard corrugations and the steep tracks, the remoteness, all the water that you needed to take in for provisions.
It really was the most awful choice of like first bike touring. Yeah, I mean, it was make or break, really. I set off with a boyfriend, it broke him. but yeah, it was, parts of it are some of my proudest achievements for sure. Getting through the Tanami, yeah, there were times when I tried to take the I can't remember, the Mawson Trail. But it was a particularly wet spring in Australia, and it was just it was a disaster, absolute disaster. And I had to carry my bike over, like, I could see the road. I just thought, sod this. I've had enough of like skating around on this wet clay. I'm just going to get myself back to the road that I can see from the map, and I can see the vehicles like a kilometre or two away. Unbeknownst to me, I had to trek across. Look, there was 3 barbed wire fences. I don't to this day understand why there would need to be 3 parallel barbed wire fences, but I had to hoof all my gear over and trudge through like this wet mud, like clay. And there's a picture of me somewhere if you scroll back far enough. I just look absolutely dejected. I've got like barbed wire tear to my face, and I just wanted to, I remember the first or the second barbed wire fence, I just wanted to sit down in the mud and cry. But I was just all alone in the universe. Like there was nobody was going to come and solve this for me. And so you just have to pick yourself up. I remember telling myself, look, you can have a good old cry. When you get to the road, we'll sit down and we'll have a cry. But right now, you just need to keep going. You need to keep hoofing your stuff over, and we have to handle this. Yeah, that was particularly grim, but it remains one of my proudest and greatest achievements, is that I was so unprepared. Like I didn't have the experience I didn't know if I was even capable. But because of the way things shook out, I was supposed to be there with a boyfriend, and I turned out to be on my own. Very, very fortunately, it turns out that I did have the chutzpah to get through it, but it really might have gone the other way. Yeah, that was quite the baptism of fire, and I certainly wouldn't recommend Australia as a starting point for anybody's bike touring career. Although it worked out for me, very fortunately.
Do you ever come across moments now, Helen, in your tours where you'll hit some type of adversity, and do you ever take yourself back to, well, you got yourself through Australia, you can get yourself through this? You talk about it there as a moment of pride. Imagine Australia is just one of many examples of mental resilience and grit and toughness that you can draw on, but do you ever reflect back on that to help you through tough moments?
I'm sure there has been times. I can't recall a specific example right now, but certainly in the back of my mind, I always know you've done much harder. Yeah. There's times where, you know, if I'm picking a route or an itinerary, I'm looking at a particularly long and steep dirt climb, I'll definitely think, okay, well, you did this, so you can probably do this. And each time, again, there's so many times that I've done a thing that I thought was going to be the hardest thing, and then I use that as the example in the future of like, oh, you did that last thing, so maybe you can do this next thing. So yeah, I do build on. I mean, I remember climbing Mount Etna in Sicily, and it was a solid, like, it's, 7% consistently all the way up. I think it's like 2,000 meters at the time. But at the time, that was a monumental task. I was like, oh, can I even do this? Is this even possible? Like, I remember decanting all of my, my Nutella out of the glass jars into like plastic, like really reducing my weight down. And it was one of the biggest endeavors I'd ever done at the time. And now, when I'm like in like full tour mode and I'm like at my normal fitness, then I would look at a 2,000-kilometer climb in a day and be like, okay, well that's a big day. Let's start early. But I wouldn't be like, oh, can I even do this? Is this even conceivable for me? So yeah, things that at the time feel like the biggest thing I've ever done are now the example of, oh, well, you did that thing, so let's try this next thing.
Oh, I love it. As opposed to looking for a reason to say no to something, you can reflect back and give yourself so many reasons to say, yes, this is possible for me.
Yeah. I'm an eternal optimist. I always look at the sky and think the sun's trying to come out, not, oh, it's getting cloudy. Like I always believe that it's possible until proven otherwise.
Yeah, and I imagine like your tours, you're talking there about the mud fest on the Mawson Trail. I've seen images of people in that mud, and for those who don't know the type of mud we're talking about the impossibility of continuing to cycle through it. Staying upright on a slippery surface is one thing, but the mud just clogs up. It clogs up your drive chain. It clogs up your brakes. You need a stick to dislodge it every 10 metres.
Yeah.
Mud and rain is one thing. I'm sure that you have, on the flip side, had the exact polar opposite of, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, and I know you went there not in summertime. I would nearly say could it be an impossibility to cycle there through the summer? but sandstorms and wind and heat, you would have faced those on many occasions as well.
Yeah, because of this trip, I mean, I was in the south of Iran at the tail end of summer, which was far from ideal. I had some 40 plus days there, but that was necessary because I needed to be in Saudi for the winter. So you can't, when you're traveling overland for a year, there probably is going to be some time that you're in some place where the weather isn't ideal. So in the south of Iran, I was having to be up at sunrise. I had to go 100 kilometers if I wanted to get to the next service station and just sit in the air conditioning for the afternoon and to refill with water, frankly. So you were committed to doing 100 kilometers. And to do that, you had to be up and riding at sunrise in order to arrive by midday, because after midday, it got to above 40. And I know from unfortunate experience that above 40, it's quite dangerous. You can start, getting quite sick, passing out potentially. So yeah, that was uncomfortable riding at times. Saudi, again, because I deliberately planned to be there in the wintertime, it was okay. It was like there were warm days. Like I had one day where like there was such a powerful headwind, but it was at the time when I was being escorted by the traffic police. And usually they like to ride behind you because the idea is they're trying to protect you. Like even though the shoulder is like almost as wide as a lane, they're sort of believe that they need to protect you from being hit from behind. So I managed to convince this one particular guy to ride in front of me that day so I could sort of slipstream him. And they switch out these traffic cops every few hours. So I had to train each new traffic cop that I got that day to ride in front of me at, if you go about 8 kilometers an hour, I can just about keep up without bumping into your bumper. So I had a day where, I mean, thank goodness I had some, they were really, agreeable, amenable traffic cops that day that were willing to help me. Because if they'd remained belligerently behind me, I was barely making 5 or 6 kilometers an hour. It was absolutely diabolical. And, not to mention the sand in my face. But again, that was just one day out of about 10 weeks in Saudi. So Muriel, who you've spoken to, who I met in Saudi, I know he was coming the other way, and he complains about the headwinds, of course. So necessarily, let's assume that all of his headwinds were my tailwinds for the vast majority of the time. So I did get very, very lucky. Yeah, poor guy. It could have been much worse for me.
I'm just thinking, my experience of being whipped by sand has been, this is such an Aussie thing, being on a beautiful sandy Aussie beach and all of a sudden the wind comes up and it sandblasts you. And I'm just trying to transport myself to a road in the shoulder in Saudi Arabia with this just whipping you in your face. Am I right to assume that, do you just resign yourself when you're traveling through a sandy desert like that there will forever be sand in your tent and sand everywhere?
For sure. And actually, I mean, I don't mind it. There's a little bit of sand in my tent at all times, even if I, give it a little shake out. I don't mind it. It's like a little souvenir. I don't really get to carry souvenirs. So especially if I've not been in my tent for a while, if I've been staying in hostels or whatever, when you get your tent out and you shake that little bit of sand out, you're like, oh, that sand, that must be Iranian sand. It's nice. It's a nice little memory to carry with me.
The police escorts you were talking about there, because I must admit, when I was watching through some of your YouTube channel, And actually, we should just take a moment here to shout that out. Your YouTube and the way that you share everything. Do you want to just give a quick shout out to YouTube, and I'll provide a link to it in our show notes?
Yeah, thanks. It's pretty wobbly, it's pretty low tech. I've recently got a GoPro, so the quality has improved. But because I do like a sort of daily vlog, it's necessarily like it's not like tightly edited. I edited it at night in my tent, but it attempts to just show like a, daily life on the road. If I'm somewhere where there's like stuff that, cultural interest, then, I include that. But otherwise there's, just general life to life, day to day, like cycling, packing the tent away, just normal travel daily vlog of life on a bicycle tour.
Yeah, and it definitely takes me there. What's the name of your channel?
It's Hels on Wheels.
Great. And actually, that's your tagline I know on Instagram and stuff as well. So I'll be providing a link to everywhere that you can find Helen, and also to her Patreon to support her on this trip as well. But what I was talking about there earlier, so I was watching your vlogs there from daily life traveling through Saudi, and the police escorts feature prominently in there. And initially my thought was, why are you being escorted? And then I thought, is it because they perceive you that your life is in danger? Are they worried about you being attacked? And then I thought that sort of goes against sort of what I've heard about Saudi culture. And then I thought, is it they're protecting you from being hit by a car? So is that very much what's behind those police escorts?
It remains a mystery what that is about, because it was so... Speaking specifically about the actual traffic police, because I was escorted by another mob of people, which is even more mysterious to me. But the actual traffic police in traffic cars in traffic police uniforms, it was so haphazard. And other cyclists on the WhatsApp group report, we got followed by the traffic police in this place, or we didn't get followed in this place. There doesn't seem to be any consistency to it, and it's only on the open road, which actually is the safest part of Saudi. The roads are wide; they're not very busy. Admittedly, the cars go fast, but I really don't know how much a car traveling behind me is going to protect me. If there's a car going to go astray, it's going to hit the traffic cop car, is going to hit me. I really don't see how that's protecting me. The actual dangerous part of cycling in Saudi is in the cities, because I'm told it's sort of like LA. I've never cycled there, but in the Saudi cities, you have like a grid of motorways. And to go from like one huge city block to another huge city block, you have to join a motorway to cross the motorway into the next giant city block. There's no road under the motorway. There's no little bridge over. You have to join this network of motorways. And that is the really, really dangerous part, like joining and leaving the motorway on those slip lanes. And I never had traffic escorts. Oh, that's not true. Once around, but that was around Mecca. So that might have been making sure that I didn't disappear into Mecca. But that's the dangerous part is in the cities, where the traffic cops were generally nowhere to be found. So different people report having escorts, not having escorts. I've never been able to make sense if it was like a solo woman thing or if it was like a particular region thing. It's a mystery. And I really think they have the best of intentions. They're obviously encouraging tourism right now, and they just want to make sure that nothing happens. But also they will be very quick to tell you, quite correctly, that Saudi is, one of the safest countries and you don't have to worry. But at the same time, they're just determined to protect me from I don't know what. It remains a mystery.
So you touched on something that's a curious question for me there, Helen, and that is about Saudi and what it's actually like. I've spoken to other travellers before on this show, and they've quite rightly said they try not to have preconceptions of the area they're going to. Or some of them don't even research or anything because they just want every experience to be fresh and learned on the road. I don't know if that resonates with you as well, but regardless of whether that is your approach or not, there would have to be some sort of thought or preconception about a country just from growing up and learning. Saudi is one that has so much mystique for me, and what I know about it probably isn't great things. I think of Saudi, I think of human rights sort of causes, or the lack of human rights that we're aware of in a judicial sort of system. What was it like for you to travel to Saudi, and what potential preconceptions did you have, and what did you come out of your experience? As the first woman to unofficially cross Saudi on a bicycle, what was your experiences there and your takeaways?
Yeah, my takeaway is that Saudi, along with Iran, is probably one of the friendliest places you can ever hope to visit. And certainly I'm ashamed to say, wherever I got this from, I was nervous about, I'm so ashamed to say this, but I was nervous about Arab men. I didn't know, how safe I would be as a solo female traveller. But I'm only admitting this now in defence of especially Gulf Arab men, that they are just the absolute kindest, most hospitable, least threatening people you could hope to meet.
And again, it goes down to what we're shown and what we're told about, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, somehow I've absorbed this idea during my 20s and 30s. I've obviously absorbed this idea from somewhere that Arab men might be a problem. But now, as sort of like recompense for my misjudgment, I want to make sure that I tell everybody like how utterly, utterly safe I felt, especially in the Gulf Arab states. I didn't even really stop to think where I was putting my tent in terms of safety across like Saudi and Oman. Just feels completely, completely safe. So I would absolutely recommend it without hesitation to any solo travellers.
Listeners, I've been using the Psych Plus AS2 Pro tiny e-pump inflator on my rides recently, and it's honestly been super, super handy. When I first got it, I was a little bit skeptical. Would I actually really ditch my hand pump for something electronic? But I have loved it. It's super small. It packs easily into my little saddlebag without weighing me down. And what I love the most is actually the tyre pressure gauge. It's great because I can see exactly what PSI I'm putting in, which comes in handy whether I'm fixing a puncture or actually doing rides which switch between dirt roads and tarmac. The unit takes about 30 minutes to fully charge, and a full charge will inflate my tyres 3 to 5 times, which is plenty enough for most rides. If you want to check it out, I've got a link in the podcast show notes to Psych Plus. And Seek Travel Ride listeners get 5% off. Simply use the code STR. It's been a solid little gadget for me, and it's definitely on my pack list for my bikepacking adventures. Okay, now back to the episode. I guess another question I have out of that, and we can talk about that specifically for Saudi, but it's more broadly a curious question that I have as well. Obviously, someone who travels with the spirit that you do, with the zest for learning and seeking new experiences and seeing the world and learning about the world's different sites. When you're going to go through a country, you're going through the visa process and everything, so you know you're going to be traveling for a period of time there. Are there places that you specifically seek out, or do you go into that country sort of blind in a way, just seeing what will happen to you in the way and whatever you find, you find? Like, do you do much research before going to places?
Generally, I use my downtime, European winter or whatever, to sort of plan a rough route. And I use the Lonely Planet guides, and I sort of put pins in the map just to sort of discover where the main points of interest are. Saudi presented a bit of a problem because it's a massive chunk of land. I mean, Chile, it's easy. You go north to south or south to north. But somewhere like Saudi, which is like a big blob of a country, if you're trying to transit it, you need to pick like the most effective route to see the interesting things. But also you're limited to 90 days, it is quite a constraint in a country the size of Saudi. So you have to sort of look on the map and see, well, this is where the main points of interest are. There's some really cool stuff down there towards Yemen. But in my case, I just didn't feel like I had time to fit that into my itinerary. So that'll have to be for another time. And so I arrive in the country with an idea of like the rough direction I'm going to take through the country, without actually, knowing exactly which road I'm going to take. I know the general direction I want to go and see the things that I want to see.
And so then what's, other than the culture and the people and everything, what is something about Saudi that took you by surprise, that was unexpected in a way?
Apart from the people and the culture, baboons. There's baboons. Wild baboons in the west between sort of Mecca and Taif and I always get these confused. Riyadh, is it? No, Jeddah. Yeah, that was a surprise to me. Didn't know that. It can snow. I wasn't lucky enough to see snow in Saudi, but it does snow in the north. Yeah, it was a very pleasant discovery. The entire country.
Yeah, wow. Oh, I've got to say, when you mentioned baboons there, it's not the animal that you would associate with that landscape. I'm trying to think of what animal I would associate with that landscape. I'm thinking desert animals, and maybe it's because I'm Australia. Are there snakes there?
Not that I saw, but I mean, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just trying to think what actually Saudi. I think of also like falcons and.
Oh, yeah, they're big into, and in the Emirates as well. Like they're big into their falconry. Actually, I visited a falcon hospital. That was in Qatar. But yeah, they take their falcons very seriously. You're allowed to take them on flights as a passenger in the
Wow.
Emirates and possibly Saudi. Yeah, yeah.
That's a very different proposition. You know, you board a flight hoping there might not be a restless, screaming toddler next to you. Imagine being sat next to a falcon.
Well, don't worry, because they're only allowed in first and business class. You won't get them in like the regular.
Yeah. And you have totally picked that I only travel cattle class, so I'd rather spend the money on first or business class on my actual experiences and my holiday than on a trip that takes hours, if that makes sense, or a day if I'm flying back to Australia. So let's talk then about, we understand that you've sort of adjusted to this life organically. It's just the way everything has transpired. So it feels natural for you to be living with not many possessions and to sort of be traveling in a nomadic lifestyle. But what's it like from reality? So what's it like to not have a fixed address? What's it like? Because there's things in our life, sadly, which aren't all about travel and fun and experiences. And there's things like administrative processes. So, you know, insurances and health cover and things. How do you deal with that side of things as a full-time bicycle traveller?
I mean, sometimes the life admin, I mean, it's not it's not riveting, but it can be an absolute headache. Just things like, because I don't have like a permanent phone number, for example, I've just spent far too much of my life trying to pay a tax bill in Australia, and they want to send me like a notification code to my phone, which I don't have. The smallest things just become like unfathomably hard. But I mean, it's a small price to pay, I suppose. And I do, like, I just have to accept that I am going to, slip through, a few cracks in the system, because I don't have a permanent address or a working phone number. And increasingly with online security, they want to text you passcodes, which is, makes my life a bit difficult. But really, I mean, it's not a big enough thing to put me off, but it is one of my worst headaches up with, applying for visas. It's dealing with life admin on the road without having like a permanent phone number. It can be a challenge, but I mean, you just have to find a new way. And, I've had to like borrow people's phones to receive like this random people's phone number on my bank accounts so that I can receive the security code. So, I mean, you have to find a way to make it work.
So then tax and phone codes and thing is one thing. What about sickness on the road? And I'm not talking, I know in the moment it's horrible, but I'm not talking a stomach illness or diarrhea or food poisoning. Have you had, and touch wood, perhaps you haven't, but have you had to deal with things like medical issues on the road? And how's that been?
Not really, touching some wood right now.
I'll touch it for you.
Yeah, thank you. I did get COVID, of course. And I didn't really even know I had COVID. I just took a COVID test across the border and they said, you've got COVID. So, but I mean, I was very fortunate. It didn't really affect me too badly. There was a day in Scotland where I don't know what had happened to me. This was 5 or 6 years ago. But I was so knocked sideways by some kind of flu that I hallucinated some people by the side of the road that I was chatting to. And I thought I knew them. And then their faces morphed into completely different people before my eyes. And I realized that I was actually really very sick. And I checked myself into a hostel and just slept for like 36 hours. But I think that's the worst I've got away with somehow. I have a pretty, from this long of travel, I do have a pretty strong constitution for the most part. But I've been lucky as well.
Is there even travel insurance or health insurance cover or something that if you wanted to, you could take out?
This is a bit of a point of contention with my family. I'm supposed to have done that by now. But it's actually surprisingly difficult to find travel insurance for cyclists, because so many travel insurance policies will not cover cycling as an extreme sport. Realistically, the greatest threat to me is a traffic accident. And until I find an insurance policy that specifically covers you cycling on the road in your travel insurance, then there's really little point in me having like a regular insurance. So it is a thing I'm supposed to be doing, is finding a cycling specific travel insurance policy.
Yeah, and actually I'd nearly put a shout out to my listeners there. If you've had experience on this and you found the answer to this, can you get in touch? Email podcast@seektravelride.com and actually fill me in on what you've done for this, because it's something I've personally struggled with a little bit as well. And sometimes cycling will be covered but it's not cycle touring, and if you have to remain on asphalt or tarred roads, if you go off onto dirt roads or up over a certain elevation, like in the mountains, you're not covered. So,
or if you're away for more than 6 months in a year.
Yeah, it's not. And I feel that insurance is one of those things. If there's a way to not have to pay out on a claim, they're going to find it. and there's no point trying to take something and hoping it'll all work out, because the likelihood is if it's in a grey area, it won't be covered. But yeah, if we have anyone on the show who listens who's found a way through this, please definitely get in touch. And if they do, Helen, I'll reach out to you and I'll put it up on my Instagram for others as well, so that they know what the answers are there too. You mentioned family and friends there, and I can understand from their perspective wanting you to be covered and whatnot, but what is their perspective and view on the way that you live your life? You've done this for almost 2 decades in a different type of way, but now full-time on the road on a bike. How do they view your lifestyle?
I mean, I think it just becomes normal to them. Yeah, in terms of my parents, I think they'll tell stories about how they knew from certain points in my life, they knew that I was going to be adventurous with, sort of like 2020 hindsight. They can look back and allegedly pinpoint the moment. So I think, they've always seen it come in, I think. I was very lucky that we were able to go on like school trips to like France and Italy, and they took us on family holidays to France and Spain where possible. So we've always, traveled a little bit. So I think they've only got themselves to blame. They created this travel monster, but I think it's normal for them now, and I'm really, really grateful. They come to visit me. I've just recently caught up with my brother and his wife in Cairo. My mum came to see me in Jerusalem, and my dad has visited numerous places. He's been to see me in Jordan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Greece, Croatia. They're quite glad of having interesting places to come and visit me at.
As opposed to, the typical, a Brit who lives in Australia, and don't get me wrong, Australia's a fantastic place to visit, but the places your family has gone to and experienced because you live your life in this way as well. How many people can say their parents went to Kyrgyzstan? It's those sort of things, isn't it? It's great. It's actually a positive from the way that you're doing things, that they've adjusted to this lifestyle and join you for certain parts of it. Have any of them ridden a bike with you?
No, actually, well, I went on a little day cycle with my dad in South America, but I think he vowed it was going to be, this was before I was bicycle touring, but there was like a particularly remote thing that we were trying to get to, and so we hired bikes for the day, and it was quite the adventure for a man that would have been in his, like, I guess, mid-60s at the time. My brother is a prolific rider. I mean, my brother cycles, and he cycles to work across London, but he's very proud to point out that he went on an international bike trip long before I ever did. He cycled in the Netherlands as a Boy Scout. And hopefully next... Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just comparing that to the Netherlands.
Yeah.
His first trip is the Netherlands as a Boy Scout, and your first bicycle tour is like taking on the Gibb River Road in Australia.
Yeah. But as he'll point out, he got there far earlier than I did. So maybe I'm following in his trail. It's certainly the way that he would like to see it. But yeah, hopefully I'll have a chance to ride with my bro in the future. That'd be cool. He does some rides around England when he has the chance. So yeah, that'd be nice to ride with him for sure. Oh,
absolutely. There's sort of special moments there as well. Do you get lonely on the road? You're obviously comfortable in your own company. Otherwise, I don't think traveling in this way could be possible if you weren't.
No, you wouldn't do it.
Do you find there's times of loneliness?
I don't think so. That's not to say that there's not a time where, like, if I'm experiencing a particularly phenomenal thing, like a really stunning sunset or just amazing place or wonderful campsite, there's certainly times when I feel like this is wasted. Like, it's too bad somebody else isn't enjoying the majesty of this sunset right now. But to say that I get lonely, I don't. I think it's truthful to say I don't experience loneliness. As you say, I'm very happy on my own, else I simply wouldn't be doing this. No, not lonely. And also, I also think as well, doing the YouTube vlog means I am literally chatting away to my camera all day long. I feel like I'm talking to somebody. I also listen to podcasts, so I feel like I'm hearing from somebody. So loneliness, no. No.
Yeah, it's really true that as well. And I know through hosting this podcast, I know that I have a community of people that listen to me. And I often say that when I'm chatting with a guest, we're really having a big communal conversation because other people are in on this conversation as well. And I know I certainly have listened to podcasts on a ride through the wee hours of a dark night where I don't want to feel loneliness, and listening to something makes me feel like I'm not alone. So I definitely can understand how with your vlogs, chatting into the camera makes you feel that there's people that are with you or people part of the conversation. Speaking with guests, what you say there about seeing these amazing experiences and wanting to share them, that's something that has come through. It's a repetitive theme that perhaps is the only, and I don't even know if downside's the right way to describe it, but it's the only thing that they can think of where when they're on a solo tour, when they've wanted to be with others, is to share those moments.
Yeah.
My mind boggles at the moments you've had. It's an impossible question to pinpoint the best because you can't rank these things. But if we were to even think about natural moments and man-made monuments and stuff, you'd have such a long list of things that you could think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to recall. Like, so, I mean, I've been so insanely fortunate in the things that I've experienced that I worry about my memory. I really do, because there's so many different new incredible experiences that I sometimes have struggled. I struggle to remember, this amazing place, was it in this country or that country? Like it becomes quite foggy, and I worry about my memory, but hopefully it's just that my brain is just full of so many incredible experiences that it's hard for my brain to catalogue them all. Recently in Saudi Arabia, my good friend Fiona took me out to, it's called like the Edge of the World, I think, which is this incredible cliff face that just, you can see an impossible amount of miles into the distance. And that was an incredibly moving experience. Something that I probably wouldn't have been able to get to on the bicycle, although there was a cyclist named Kerman. He seems to have cycled out there. Yeah, I'm very glad to have had a lift there. But that was an incredible place to visit most recently, yeah. But also, the majesty of some of the mosques that I visited in Cairo are absolutely spectacular, and I just gazed in wonder. I can photograph and sit in mosques all day long. I just find the geometry of the art so pleasing to my eye. Yeah, I couldn't possibly begin to even think of a top 10 most glorious places. I live in wonder on a weekly basis.
That is 100% understandable. I couldn't ask you for a top 10. I couldn't do that. Because I even know that if you could list 10 things, there's probably 100,000 of them that could make that list, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Your point there about the mosques as well, it is through the beauty of speaking with people who've travelled in the way you do is I've been able to stare at these photos of these amazing buildings, and you're right, the geometry, like the mosaics and the colours, they feel like peaceful places, and that's just the architecture. Then you've got, the rugs and the Persian carpets and stuff that adorn the floors as well. Like, they really are places you could just sit and be reflective as well.
Yeah.
You've used mosques as a place to sleep as well, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, the Saudi police, very determined that I'd be safe at night. So initially, when I was first finding my way across Saudi, I didn't even know if I would be permitted to camp in the grounds of a roadside mosque. I'd come from the Emirates in Oman, where for the most part non-Muslims are not to go inside mosques. So I was really hesitant about, will I be allowed to go near it? I mean, mosques are a handy place to camp because, of the water supply, apart from anything else. But yeah, the very first mosque I approached, I was with my very first traffic cop, and I don't know if some calls were made, but I was told to sleep inside the mosque. I was told to bring my bike inside the mosque because, again, even in such a safe country, they're obsessed with, making sure that me and my bike are safe. And it became a bit of a theme after that. Like, I would be in some remote place, and the traffic cop would hand me over to the local the town cop, and they would show me to the women's mosque. Go inside, make sure you lock the door behind you, bring your bike inside. Even on times where I've left my bike outside because it is 100% safe, the mosque caretaker has come along and said, bring your bike inside. So yeah, I fully recommend it. I mean, I don't know if it's the same for men. I can't necessarily say that men will have the same experience in Saudi, but certainly time and time again, I was encouraged to sleep inside the women's section. And obviously I always did that respectfully. I kept my head covered, took my shoes off, etc. But yeah, even bringing the bike inside, like, which, you know, you're not supposed to tread on the carpet, let alone put your muddy bike on it. Yeah, generally if there's like a little, you know, the washroom section, then, you know, they would point me to put my bike inside there. So yeah, I enjoyed sleeping in mosques. It's a lovely place to be, and also it saves me putting up my tent when I don't have to as well. So I was very grateful for that in Saudi.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to set an alarm either, actually, at a mosque. I'm just thinking
No.
you'd have the call to prayer early in the morning, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but even like some of them, like just like little village mosques, sometimes they don't even necessarily have to call to prayer in the morning. But I would still set my alarm in case somebody was going to come for an early morning prayer. I didn't want to be in their way. But yeah, some of them are just, especially like the women's section, or sometimes it's like a separate little women's, you know, building. They're so infrequently visited that in the remote ones, you're probably lucky to even see anybody there.
Far out. I'm just thinking, these are impossible questions. I almost feel silly asking them. But if I was to ask you what one of the most unlikely, weirdest places you found yourself sleeping, can you think of anything there?
Oh, I will. I'll think of something 10 minutes after I've hung up the phone with you.
That's all right.
Oh, I slept in a boat that was in a forest. Right, this isn't. I don't know where that was in the world. What country was that? Somewhere in Europe. It was raining and raining and raining, and I was getting ready to pitch my tent in some muddy patch of a mountain. This was inland, you understand? And I just found this like abandoned like speedboat. It was covered in like green mold, like the windscreen was smashed, but it had a semblance of a roof to it. So I crawled in there and slept inside there, somewhere in Europe.
When you first said you slept in a boat, I thought, oh, that's not that wild. And then when you said in a forest, I was like, what?
Yeah, it was placed there by the travel gods, clearly, because it had no business being halfway up a mountain. Yeah, there it was.
That is bizarre. So, Helen, being a world traveller as you do, and knowing that this beautiful world is so diverse and full of different cultures, it's also full of different languages as well. So I picked up in your vlogs that you speak Arabic.
No, don't be deceived.
To me, well, what are you speaking there? Because you're certainly not speaking English, but you're speaking in a language that's being understood. So I want to understand how you deal with languages there anyway. And not just Saudi, but just in your travels.
I learned like a few dozen words in the language of the country I'm in. So, and you're not the first person to believe that I speak Arabic, but
totally fooled.
Yeah, yes. It's just a handful of words and sentences that I can use to get my point across, but also to get people on side. People just adore if you can get out a couple of words in the language, obviously. So yeah, I make an effort to learn a handful of words and sentences in the language of the country I'm in. Arabic, I confess that I've utterly failed. I had grand ambitions to properly speak Arabic, knowing that I was going to be in the Middle East for a year and then traveling in Africa, particularly in Northern Africa. I fully set about learning Arabic as I did learn Spanish to go to South America, thinking that this would be a fantastic language to carry me, you know, all the way from Lebanon to Morocco. But I confess my efforts stalled and I never really got past those initial first few sentences. It is incredibly hard. And yeah, it's a disappointment of mine that I haven't done better at Arabic. But yeah, now I'm moving on to, well, heading west again. So perhaps I'll give it another shot when I get to like North Africa. But for now, no, I'm not nearly the Arabic speaker that you think I am, I regret to say.
So actually then let's move on from proficiency. And maybe this is actually a more useful question for you. You mentioned there that you learn a few dozen words. Other than the obvious ones of please, thank you, hello, goodbye, shelter, what sort of words are you seeking out, or phrases do you specifically try to seek out? I don't know if that's putting you on the spot or if it's something that you think, well, this is something that I need to know how to say.
So on top of the just like general, you know, hello, goodbye, yes, no, please, thank you, like on top of the essentials, I do enjoy learning an idiom in a foreign language, because people really get a kick out of hearing a foreigner who can only speak a few dozen words come out with a perfectly landed idiom. And it really delights people when you can do that. And it's a lovely way to win friends. Also, in the Arab world, when somebody asks how you are, like my natural instinct is to say fine or good is the sort of standard Anglo answer. But here, if you reply Alhamdulillah, which literally means God is great, in answer to the question of how is you, then you'll be met with all kinds of like happy smiles and welcomes, just because you've answered in a more like culturally correct way than like a literal like translate word for word, I am fine, thank you, how are you? If you do it in the more idiomatic way, it's met a lot better.
It's interesting though, because you say that it is so true. I can think of instances here in France where that's the case, but also, even in English speaking countries, things are different. So in 2007 and 8, I lived in the UK. I lived in London for a while, and I still laugh now. The first, are you well? Are you right? Like, that's the way
Yeah.
that those questions are asked, which isn't in Australia. And I still remember being at work once and someone wasn't at work, and I said, oh, where's such and such? And someone said, oh, they're feeling poorly. And for a while that morning I thought, they don't have any money, like why are they not here? Like it didn't hit me that feeling poorly had anything to do with an illness. I thought it had to do with finances. So it is one of those things. I could totally understand how people would get a kick out of you being able to speak culturally, but also with an idiom. That'd be hilarious.
I love it.
Can I ask then, what is the Arabic idiom, and like translated in English? Obviously we're not going to know, but what sort of things are you saying?
In Arabic, I don't know if I have an idiom apart from being able to answer the with God is great. But in Turkish, it's nice to say, is it, oh no, I can't remember on the spot now. But it's a way of saying, is it Elena Salug? It means thanks to your hands. So if somebody's handed you a meal or done fixed your bike for you or something, if you say Elena Salug, it means thank you to your hands, which is it's a pleasant way of thanking people as well.
Oh, I love that. In fact, I'm going to take that as my new challenge, Helen, that the next time I visit a country that's unfamiliar, I'm going to do some research to be able to have that as something that I can pull out of my sleeve. Something actually that's come up in previous conversations with guests is that we often think that body language is a universal language, and it can be in ways, but they have learnt travelling in different countries. And they learnt this travelling in Southeast Asia. I'm thinking of guests Roxy and Tommy, that body language is different in different countries as well. And have you found that too?
Yeah, for sure. I remember in, it was Tonga or Samoa, I was being greeted by young men would sort of like raise their eyebrows, like in a sort of like forehead shrug, which I would perceive as somebody hitting on you, like giving you a come on. But then an old lady did it to me, and I was like, what is happening here? And I discovered that the sort of eyebrow forehead shrug is just like a sort of greeting. It's like, hey, how are you, across the Pacific? And then here in the Arab world, there's a sort of gesture where you put your thumb against your fingers, which to an Italian, it might be like the delicious, that Italian gesticulation. But here it means like wait. And I only sort of picked this up by seeing like traffic cop, like just nobody specifically told me that, but I just saw it enough times in enough context. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure I understand what that means now.
That would confuse me, because for me, if I want someone to wait, I'd perhaps put my hand out. Although I also know, and this is the Greek heritage, I know that if you want to insult a Greek person, you would put an open palm in front of their face. That's sort of like 5 candles on your grave. Don't do that.
Noted.
Obviously, it's in the situation, and if you were giving someone a high five, you'd be happy, and they would know that you're not trying to insult them. But yeah, I mean, I grew up with that, so there you go. A little bit of body language exchange for you there. I know you've been through Greece. In fact, I joke it can't be a Seek Travel Ride guest session if I don't talk about food, and you will have had all sorts of food experiences. I'm sure you've had the most amazing food in your life. You've probably had times where you haven't perhaps found the food you wanted and maybe food poisoning, but I feel this is the most impossible question. But if you were to dream up your dream meal or food from your experiences, what would that sort of entail? It could be a cuisine if you don't want to narrow it down, but yeah.
It would probably, just from recent memory, it would have to be Iranian food easily. I mean, you can eat anything in Iran will be like it's just a taste sensation, like a stew or their sweets. Everything seems to contain rose water. They have their salads. This is remarkable to me, and as an Australian, I'm sure you'll be able to relate. Like their whole salad there's no lettuce, there's no like filler. It's just all fresh herbs. Like imagine how much that would cost to buy like 1 packet of coriander and 1 packet of backland, and then to have that as your entire vegetables. The complete vegetable part of your meal is fresh herbs with pomegranate and rose water. It feels so luxuriant and extravagant. Everything tastes phenomenal in Iran. Absolutely phenomenal. Everything, it just feels so luxurious.
Oh, yum. I'm almost salivating thinking of this. And I did have to laugh. I'm just thinking there's not an iceberg lettuce leaf in sight.
Yeah,
Because actually,
no,
and again, I don't want to go on about Greek things, but it's something that I always think is amusing in Australia is when people serve a Greek salad and there's lettuce in it. And I'm like, there is no lettuce
yeah,
in a Greek salad. Like, this is not how you would
yeah.
make a Greek salad at all. It's how you can tell if it's authentic or not. And I have friends now who joke saying Bella would be happy with this because there's no lettuce. So oh, I'm just thinking about that Iranian experience though, and just even the way you've talked about rose water, and I'm just thinking also just flavor some amazing ways of cooking vegetables as well. You know, they're not steamed to death without any taste, and
No.
oh, delights. And I'm sure, like I said, at the other end of the spectrum, no doubt as a world traveler, you will have anecdotal stories of where food didn't sit right with you either. And hopefully not too many tales of that.
No, again, I've got a pretty resilient stomach, I suppose. I've very rarely had tummy problems. I'm quite fortunate. I drink the tap water so far wherever I go. I drink the tap water. I think I've just built up a resistance.
I think that is a thing, though. I think that is like through exposure, your stomach sort of builds up to it as well.
Yeah,
Maybe I've made that up. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I can't have just been this lucky. I think there must be some some training my gut has gone through.
Well, food aside, then, obviously, one of the most important things for someone who lives full time on their road is their equipment. And I wanted to talk briefly about your bike there. And I'm guessing it has evolved as your trip has evolved because it's probably the thing that you need to be most reliable. I mean, obviously, your tent as well. But what does a world touring bike actually look like? And what things do you do to make sure that you can keep it maintained and keep going?
Well, at the time when I was first setting out on my first bike trip back in Australia, because I couldn't even change a tire back then. So I needed a bike that would just be like, zero maintenance effectively. And back then I had a job. So I just threw some money at the situation and bought a really, really amazing bike that should never let you down. And for that reason, I didn't have to do a lot of the bike maintenance. It has like a roll-off internal gear system at the back, so no derailleur to mess with. I've recently, or a couple of years ago, upgraded to a belt drive system, so now I don't even have chain to worry about. The belt doesn't stretch, so there's no tensioning of the belt. I've had this belt on for, I don't know, probably approaching 15 or 20,000 kilometers. You don't need to tension it. I give it an occasional clean from time to time, but it's next to zero maintenance now. So,
And is this your bike, Gibbo?
Gibbo, yes, that's it's an Australian bike builder, Vivente. I mean, they're fantastic, absolutely fantastic. This particular model is named the Gib, from the Gib River Road, of course, which by chance was the first dirt road that I took in Australia. And obviously, being Australian, Gib's nickname is going to have to be Gibbo.
Definitely, definitely. And actually, I did comment when I first got in touch with you that I've just reverted to calling you Hels because
Yeah,
or because that's how you would be called in Australia, no doubt as well. We shorten everything.
yeah,
I have seen those bikes before. In fact, it was when I was first thinking about cycle touring when I was in Australia, and one of our bike stores, that brand was the touring models that they had there. I didn't end up with one, but I do know exactly what you're talking about. And the idea that you need something to be, maintenance free. I mean, obviously there's things that you can't prevent fully. So
yeah.
tires, and I'm sure that you've come so far on with your bike maintenance now than the person who set off in Australia on those outback trails, not knowing how to change a puncture.
Oh my God, it was an absolute joke, like how many punctures I used to get. And I think it's because I didn't have a gauge on my pump. So I would have to judge it by thumb, and I just wasn't experienced enough to judge the pressure by thumb. And so I was routinely over or under inflating them, and it was an absolute joke how many punctures that I used to get. And I was also afraid to touch it. I had some kind of fear of even touching the pressure, so I didn't even ever refill the air on the tires because I was so afraid of going near the tire. But these days, I was ridiculous. These days, I pump them like every week or so, or a bit more often. I have a gauge on my pump, so not surprisingly, I'm down to maybe like 1 or 2 punctures a year, which I can absolutely live with.
Oh my goodness, 1 or 2 punctures a year for someone who travels extensively as you do. I think that's a dream.
It's an absolute dream. Like
roll off internal pinion gears and belt drive, not many punctures, reliable steel bike. Yeah, and so then really you're down to like changing brake pads and tyres.
Brake pads, and I have to change the oil in the roll off system every 5,000 kilometers, so a couple of times a year. The brake pads I can change them very simply, but yeah, and anything on top of that, then yeah, it requires a bike shop. But that's okay. They can give the bike a once over. But yeah, that's about the limit of my experience.
I'm just thinking here, just with the belt drive, does that mean you don't have like the most you don't have to worry about a dry chain, so you don't get that irritating noise either?
No, none of that.
You had the belt drive through Saudi? Like, I couldn't imagine
Yeah,
going on a sandy bike tour. Oh, wow,
exactly.
awesome.
Just being able to, camping on the beach, you don't have to worry nearly so much about like keeping the tire out, keeping the sand out of the chain and all that. Maybe give it a little rinse when you come off, but really, yeah, it's no big deal at all now.
Hey there, adventurers. Are you loving the stories on Seek Travel Ride? If so, you can help the podcast wheels turning, literally. Head to the link in the show notes and buy me a coffee. Every coffee fuels this podcast, supports incredible guest stories, and keeps the adventure alive. So go ahead, click the link in the show notes, grab me a virtual brew, and let's ride on together. We've talked about in Saudi specifically where you found your place to sleep and you weren't too concerned with wild camping. I know it's certainly a question a lot of my listeners have, and it's something that gives them pause, is how to determine where is safe to camp when you are wild camping. If you were to think of things that you have learnt from experience on your tour and you were telling a beginner something to consider and you were addressing their fears perhaps of wild camping, what are the sort of things you would tell them?
Okay, well, the official, and I'm not the best the best teacher of this because I have made some catastrophic mistakes. But the thing is to be seen by everybody or by nobody. That's what you need to do. If nobody knows you're there, then you're obviously safe. If loads and loads and loads and loads of people can see that you're there, then that also offers a level of safety as well. The issue is if like one or two people can see that you're there. And one way that I have slipped up from time to time is feeling like I'm in a very, very remote part of the mountains, only to find that come dusk, a farmer has come through with 200 goats. And so now I try and check that there's no animal tracks on the ground, which would indicate that come sunset, there's going to be, a couple of shepherds coming through. That's caught me out before. But across the Gulf area, like these are people that are even the wealthy folk that live in cities. They pride themselves on being of Bedouin heritage, and they'll go and like pitch a tent in the desert at the weekend. So it's very normal to just plonk your tent anywhere, and again feel super safe around here. That's not to say that I haven't. I've been bothered by other people in the evening sometimes, but never by any Arabs in this area. But you have to obviously be careful of being in a semi-remote place. It needs to be all on, I think. Everybody needs to know you're there or nobody needs to know you're there.
I really like that because I've only ever heard it the other way around, where make sure no one sees where you are, make sure no one sees you go there. And yeah, everyone needs to know you're there or nobody needs to know you're there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to champion the stories of solo female travellers because, and I know this as a female myself, just being the way I'm raised and the way my own internal voice goes, there's often a lot of fears around travelling in this way, and that as a female we're extra vulnerable. So I really appreciate the experience that you have that you're sharing as well. Because something that I came across actually by someone also was, the fear that you sometimes have in your own head, in your own tent, during a wild camp, that you're going to be attacked or something, which again is really statistically very unlikely as well. Something that they shared was, especially if you're worried and concerned about this as a woman, is that actually this is where society and the way we're raised actually goes for us, because an outsider, if they do see a tent, it's very unlikely that they're going to assume that it's a woman that's actually inside that tent.
Yeah, that's true. I think most people would assume. It's unfortunate with a bicycle, you've only got one bicycle outside, so you are sort of advertising there's only one person in the tent. But I do make a point of if I'm camping on the beach and I've been for a swim, I would never leave my bikini hanging. I would never leave any female evidence outside, so that then their presumption would be that there's a guy inside. But that's not to say that there aren't men that haven't been pulled out of their tent and robbed in the night. So yeah, again, everyone needs to be careful, but yeah, certainly it's best to not advertise that you're a solo woman inside the tent, for sure.
In terms of the bicycle community then, because travelling in this way would mean that you do get to make friends with other bicycle travellers and you would pass other bicycle travellers. What is that touring community like? And I know that people share that there's WhatsApp groups that you can be part of so that you can, when you're in a country or on a certain route, that you know that there's others around you. What's it like to be part of that group?
Yeah, like you say, I think that's how I met Muriel, to be honest. It was probably through one of the WhatsApp groups, and it became apparent that we were going to cross paths in Saudi, so we arranged to camp together for a couple of nights. Yeah, it's nice. Most of my interactions necessarily are remotely via WhatsApp, but, it's a very, very supportive community of people telling you, this border's open, this border's not open, camp here, this is a nice place to camp. Muriel is really good for pointing out nice campsites. It's a lovely exchange, and if you want to find somebody to ride with, you can probably do that as well. It's a good support network of people. You often hear people talking about finding their tribe, and my friends and family at home obviously lead very different, perhaps more conventional lifestyles, and you don't really feel like you belong in that tribe of people going to work and having families and stuff. But this community of cyclists, even though they're not in your physical, proximity, I feel like my tribe, they're the group of people I belong to, of these sort of bicycle nomads who, help each other and sometimes even get to cross paths with each other. But because of our very nature, because we are bicycle travelers, we're a moving target. We don't easily get pinned down, so you can't necessarily be in the same physical area. But, I definitely feel like that is my tribe that I have found.
Yeah, and so you get a sense of community from them as well.
Yeah, exactly. People, and they, just that understanding of it's such a rare and lovely thing when you meet somebody and they say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, I do this. I travel by bike." And they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, I get it." It's usually people would meet that with "What? How? But how is this possible?" Where when you meet somebody that goes, "Yeah, cool, totally get that." It's a wonderful thing to feel understood by somebody.
And it's that sort of thing, like the curious questions that I have for you, they're not even questions for them because they've travelled in this way and they understand how it's possible for you to live that lifestyle. And they understand probably your motivations to live that lifestyle as well.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. Just, to know that somebody is on a similar wavelength, they've had a similar experience, and to just be able to meet somebody else that goes, I travel by bike. Okay, cool. We don't need to have the conversation about how many kilometers you do a day or how much is your bike weigh. You understand one another.
Conversely, it's also understanding context too, because I feel like it's only people who travel in this way or cycle that even appreciate the answers to those questions that you'd give them.
Yeah.
Saying you cycled 100 kilometers to someone who doesn't cycle, it's either this massive thing or they go, "Oh, yeah," and brush it off because they don't understand what the physical effort involved in it is.
Yeah.
It's that shared understanding for sure.
Exactly.
I guess one big question that definitely I know comes up with other guests, and I've seen it asked before, and we talked about the horrible administrative side of living a life like this, but financially, how do you fund a lifestyle like this? And obviously there's the obvious answers of you do without a lot more. There's possessions that you don't own, and I can understand, but from a budget point of view, do you set yourself a budget? Do you have an allocation per country? How do you figure out how much you can have to spend to sustain you on the road?
Okay, so I prefer to spend cash because that way I withdraw a chunk from the ATM and then I pop 1 week's worth in my wallet, and then I can watch how my budget is going. And I do that on 100 Australian dollars a week, and then so that's 5,200 a year, and then I give myself a little kitty, if you like, of $1,800 for if I need to have a flight or a bike maintenance or something. So altogether, I've been spending $7,000 a year since, I don't know, 2016 or 17 or whatever. As I said, I do that by putting a little bit of money into my wallet, my weekly amount, and I can watch how it goes down. So that's how I manage my finances on the road. How I fund things. Initially, it was just purely from savings, and then increasingly, some of my longer term supporters on Facebook and people that followed my trip since Australia encouraged me to open Patreon and PayPal accounts. And so, just when I came around to the idea of doing that, the pandemic hit. So that was put on hold. And then, as we began to emerge from the pandemic, I opened Patreon and PayPal accounts. And so now, between that and the small amount of money that I make from YouTube, I think I'm covering about 2/3 of my costs, and then the other third remains coming from my savings still. So it's slowly but surely. Hopefully, I'm on my way to be able to, if I can break even and not worrying about my reserves of funds running out, then that'll be my dream come true. Yeah, that's the short answer to it.
It makes perfect sense as well, because I think that is something. It's another barrier to entry for some people. I can understand it as well in that funding, a lot of people will save so much to go on a single tour. So the idea that you could perpetually be on tour, and it's obviously taken adjustments to your lifestyle, and there's things that you don't have that you're quite happy not to have. You live out of what you strap on your bike.
Yeah, I mean, when you have to literally carry everything, then you become a lot less keen to have stuff if you have to carry it up every single hill. But yeah, the budget, I should say, like, it remains the same whatever country I'm in. So I spent $100 a week in Iran. I spent $100 a week in Norway. In Norway, like, most of my money went on ferries to cross the fjords, and I was dumpster diving across Norway. I met a couple of Norwegian warm showers hosts who told me about dumpster diving there. The first one, I thought, well, this is an oddball. And then the second guy told me the similar thing. I was like, okay, 2 Norwegian people have told me to try dumpster diving. And I've got to tell you, my diet improved enormously when I started dumpster diving in Norway. It's absolutely criminal what they're throwing away. I lived on that $100 in Norway, mostly on ferries and a tiny bit of food, but most of the food came for free. Whereas in Iran, that same $100, I know some people will go to Iran and be like, oh, this is so cheap, I can make mad savings here. But I spent the exact same amount of money. It's just I was able to stay in guest houses and eat nice meals in nice restaurants with that same amount of money. I don't travel to, places like Lebanon or Turkey or Iran, places that you can travel much cheaper. I don't save the money away. Like, I think it's nice to, if you're visiting a country where the economy is a bit poor, like, it's nice to be able to inject a small amount of money into the economy. And in return, I get to have a lovely experience of guest houses and nice meals. So the budget is exactly the same, regardless of where I am. It's just what I can get for my money.
I really love that approach that you take as well, that yes, I could be treated here for days or weeks. And I know in conversations, places like Iran or Turkey, or people are inviting you in for meals. You could probably not have to spend money on food there, almost, from what I'm hearing. But I love that you consciously do because you want to be supportive. What about, and obviously there's something about people sharing food and whatnot. I imagine, and it's a presumption of mine, but people probably want to give you things as well. But traveling in the way that you do, taking physical items must be hard.
Yeah, I've had to turn down some. There was a really lovely souvenir offered to me near the Emirates Saudi border. I think that he wanted to give me, I can't remember the name, but it's the garment that the men wear on their head in Saudi. So like the red and white, I think the part of it's called the gutra. That might be the black rope that wraps around twice, and then the red and white checked cloth, which would have been the most fantastic gift. And I really was sorely tempted, partly to just be nice to the guy offering it to me, but partly because, like, what a cool thing to have been given. But I knew, like, what am I going to do with this? I'm just going to carry it in my bag for what purpose? So I turned him down politely, I hope. And instead, he gave me a small jar of Arab perfume called oud, which is absolutely delicious smelling. And it's a lot more. I mean, that's the souvenir I can carry. It's ever so small. It's useful. When you're carrying something, everything has to have a purpose. So this is, it's nice to be able to smell nice in a way that, the souvenir that he first tried to give me it was unrealistic for me to accept. But just, again, testament to like how, like, he just a complete stranger saw a cyclist and went, oh, I need to offer that person a gift to show them how welcome they are in this country. Incredible.
Oh, it blows your mind. And I mean, gosh, you could probably fill rooms of stuff with gifts that you could be given, but you're taking the gifts of experiences instead. I do love that you have such a ritzy, as an Aussie to say, a shower in a can. So which for those who don't understand what I'm saying, it's when you don't have a shower, so instead you just use some deodorant, but you just have some beautiful Arabic perfume instead.
Yeah. I thought that was called a pommy shower.
Oh, is it? Is it? That's just what you do when you're camping, isn't it? You shower in a can.
I thought Australians called it a pommy shower. I thought you were cleaning it up for me.
I've not heard pommy shower, so maybe it's just in different parts that we're learning as we go on this podcast. I love it. Helen, I mentioned at the start there you're in Egypt at the moment and you have plans to travel through Africa, but what's ahead of you at the moment and how are those plans shaping up?
Yeah, those plans are in the toilet, regrettably. The big idea of cycling through the Middle East was because I was trying to reach the eastern side of Africa. I have a sort of rough appointment with my dad to meet in Ethiopia at some stage. And when Saudi started offering tourist visas only about 5 years ago, then that suddenly opened up an overland passage. Like the ferries across the Eastern Mediterranean just haven't existed since the refugee crisis. Those things have gone away. So to get to Northeast Africa by land was possible only when Saudi started offering tourist visas. Prior to that, you only had a Hajj visa or a business visa. So when I clocked that there was a route through the Middle East to Africa, which would also take in Iran, which was a dream of mine, then that was the whole thinking behind. I think I obviously wanted to see, the Middle East on some level, but it wasn't a driving factor for me. And regrettably, in the time it's taken between like pandemics and what have you to reach this point, it's now obviously the case that, and I've had a lovely time in the Middle East on my way. It wasn't just like a really, an 18-month transit. I've had a fantastic time. But by the time I have now got to Egypt, and the idea was to cycle south from Egypt down to South Africa, of course, Sudan being the way it is, it's obviously unthinkable to go on a jolly holiday there. And also Egypt. So had that not been the situation in Sudan, had Sudan not gone into war, then I would have battled my way through Egypt. Famously, 5 years ago, I know cyclists that cycled relatively easily across Egypt, but in recent years, it's absolutely forbidden to cycle in Sinai. And I've seen from other YouTubers that it's next to impossible to cycle even, down the Nile towards Sudan. So I was still going to attempt to battle the police. I viewed my experience with the Saudi police as a sort of, as a training for, having to get along with the Egyptian police. So I was going to battle my way through Egypt, but Sudan being how it is right now, there is really no point in fighting my way through Egypt to reach a country that's unvisitable. So I've had to make new onward plans after finally getting to Northeast Africa. I'm turning around and going in a different direction, sadly, for now.
So do those plans still involve Africa? Like, is West Africa something that you're thinking about there?
So the current plan is to go from Israel. I was hoping to find a boat to Cyprus. There is a cargo ship that will take my bike, but will not take me with the bike. So I'm going to have to do my worst nightmare and put the bike on a plane again to get to Cyprus. But then from Cyprus, I can take a ferry to Turkey. I can cross from Turkey to Greece, across some different Greek islands this time. And then from Italy, I can take a boat to Tunisia. And Tunisia is only on my radar because in Bahrain, I stayed with a wonderful Pakistani couple who introduced me to a Tunisian friend and sort of opened the thought of Tunisia to me. So this has worked out to be a nice way for me to get home. From Tunisia, I'm going to try and go to Algeria, but they're a bit funny about visas. They want you to apply in your home country, which is going to be a challenge. And then from Algeria to Spain, back to Europe, Christmas with the family. And then from there, I'll either cycle back and continue down West Africa entirely by land and by sea, or I will fly into Ethiopia and cycle down the east coast of Africa, or the eastern side of Africa, having skipped Sudan. So one of those two things. The plan is to at least get a little flavour of North Africa from Tunisia, and maybe Algeria is the best I can hope for at this point, unfortunately, without getting on a flight, which I really am loath to do.
It's just testament to the way that you travel there as well. You love arriving in a country and traveling through and going from that way.
It's not just, I physically loathe putting my bike on a plane, but it's not just that. I love the feeling of overlanding and the incremental change that, that doesn't happen at the political boundary of a country, but you start, the language changes, the food changes, it all happens incrementally, day by day by day. One country begins to sort of morph into another. And if you just get on a plane from Egypt to Ethiopia or whatever, then you just bang, you're in a brand new culture. You haven't had that, incremental evolution of culture and language and lifestyle. So I do detest flying with the bike, but yeah, it looks like I'm not going to be able to find a sea passage from Israel to Cyprus, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a pity that cargo ship just won't allow you on as well. You can't sort of do a trade, like a woofing trade where you work for them for a little bit across the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it to them again. And I mean, I really would have considered that option because it's €50 to ship the bike, which, I would gladly pay, except the seaports don't align with the airports. So I would have to ship my bike from one Israeli city and then travel to the different Israeli city to get a flight, which will arrive at a different Cyprus city. And then I have to get across the country to pick up my bike from the different Cyprus port. So it just sounds like an absolute headache.
Speaking of headaches then, border crossings and stuff, like, I guess it's funny, even not travelling with a bicycle, for some reason I always get a little bit extra stressed when I'm going in and out of a border. Do you have the same? And I guess what sort of things, like, is it, there's times where you've had to pre-apply for a visa and so you've got the visa intact and everything's fine, but have you had times where a border crossing hasn't been a certainty for you?
Yeah, 100%. Saudi Arabia, for example, I managed to put the wrong name on my visa application and I thought I was being so clever as well. The way the question was formatted was like first name, fine, middle name or father's name, then last name. So I thought, oh, well, I'm in a Middle Eastern country, so I'll put my father's name in that section. Of course, I mean, it said in big letters at the top of the form, enter your details exactly as they appear on the passport, but somehow that part slipped my mind. And so in the place, where it said middle name or father's name, I entered my father's name. But really that was addressing the people with passports in Arabic who have, I guess, their father's name on their passport, presumably. So the visa was issued to Helen Peter Dainty, and I really didn't know if I was going to get into the country. So when I discovered my ridiculous error, I went to the Saudi embassy in Abu Dhabi. And the guy, I don't know if he just couldn't be bothered or if it really wasn't going to be a problem, but he was like, oh, don't worry about it, just go. So I was like, okay. He sent me away. Like, now all I can do now is cycle for 4 days through the desert and cross my fingers that when I get to the border.
That would not fill me with confidence.
Exactly.
No, because it's officialdom.
It was pretty excruciating. Like, it was very stressful. And then when I arrived at the border, I was left to sit like just on my own without explanation. There wasn't somebody with the translation capability. So I was just left sitting on my own, presuming that it's because I'd messed up my visa that I was causing this kind of difficulty. But in fact, actually, I think the visa name was inconsequential. What actually the issue was letting me into the country by bicycle. Something that I had written to Saudi Tourist Information before setting out on my trip to confirm, I am a solo female cyclist. Am I literally allowed to travel on my own on a bicycle in Saudi Arabia? And I got the go ahead from Saudi Tourism, but that's not the same thing as being allowed into the country. And finally, after sitting on my own without explanation, I mean, they bought me coffee, they were very nice and everything, but I just didn't know why I was sitting there, apart from fearing the worst, it was a visa problem. But finally, somebody came and translated to me that actually phone calls were being made to who knows who in Jeddah or Riyadh, I get that confused. But yeah, they were confirming that I was going to be allowed in on my own with a bicycle. And I guess somebody gave them the go ahead and I was allowed in and was escorted by the police. But yeah, that was pretty hairy time waiting to even enter the country. And equally, crossing from Saudi to Qatar, they told me, I don't know if this is true, but they told me that I was the first person to make that crossing by bicycle. So again, phone calls had to be made. Was I going to be allowed to cross? It's the kind of border that has like a no man's land of like a few kilometers that are like barbed off, between Saudi immigration and Qatar immigration. So, I mean, to me, to my, unqualified eye, I'm like, why wouldn't I be allowed to cycle? Like, this is the safest place on earth I could cycle. There's barbed wire like on either side of the road. There's next to no traffic. Why wouldn't I be allowed to cycle here? But, when there's a rule that if the rule is no bicycles, then, some phone calls were made and I was allowed through with like this insane police escort along this incredibly safe stretch of land between Qatar and Saudi. But yeah, so those were particularly hairy ones. To get to Bahrain, even though that connected by bridge, you're just absolutely not allowed to cycle that bridge. So I had to hitchhike from Saudi into Bahrain. So I got lists with Saudis both ways for that. And then Egypt, famously, just now, I wasn't allowed in because of a GoPro camera. Ostensibly, it was the GoPro camera. I think there might have been something else afoot, to be honest. But yeah, so I was told I could either leave the GoPro at the border and come back and collect it, which obviously is no good to a person that's supposed to be overlanding, or I could just turn back. And in the time that I was trying to negotiate my way into the country with my bicycle and my GoPro camera, I watched several groups of people arrive with a GoPro, with a telephoto lens, be told you can't bring that in here. And so many people just turned around and went back to Israel and said, this is too hard. I can't be bothered. So I don't know what it is about that border, but it's a particularly challenging one. So yeah, the borders have been getting increasingly challenging in this neighbourhood, sadly.
Yeah. Oh, far out. You must do like a little internal celebration every time you've actually made it across through no man's land, through the other side and across and on your way. It must just be like a big sigh of relief.
It is. It's usually like I would get, I have the joy. For me, one of the greatest joys is being in a brand new country that I've never been to before. And it's a whole new adventure. And so I'm generally like, very, very excited on New Country Day. But increasingly recently, it's been more a case of like, that was a relief. After the events at the Egyptian border trying to get in, it got pretty ugly. And finally, the officer I was dealing with me literally just had enough of me and just marched me out of the country, really. Back to Israel. I was very fortunate Israel let me back in because I'd already used my entire 90-day stay. But yeah, back into, and that's pretty hairy as well these days as well, because now when I enter Israel, they want to know what I've been up to. There's countries like Lebanon in my passport, and they want to know what I've been up to in Palestine. So I'm, having to get used to that side of things as well. Yeah, so having been refused entry at the Sinai border, I then was still due to meet my family in Cairo. So then I had to find a way to get into the country. And again, because it got pretty ugly, I didn't know, maybe they've cancelled my visa. Like they were pretty mad at me. But so that was pretty nerve-wracking, getting on the plane to Cairo and, hoping that my visa still was applicable. But I mean, fortunately, I'm traveling with 2 passports. So I sort of had a plan B in place. But actually, everything worked out fine. But yeah, it is increasingly stressful.
Makes me on edge just hearing about it. Nothing's going to help it. You just have to go through the motions as well. And sometimes you are just helpless. And even if everything is on your side, sometimes you're at the whim of the border guard and their knowledge and what they want to do as well. You could have someone like in Saudi go, oh, yeah, it'll be fine, keep going. Or you could have someone saying, no, you're not allowed. And that's it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Helen, I know I need to wrap this up because we've spent so much time talking, but I kid you not, I could speak to you for weeks and just listen, and it's an absolute joy. I have a few quick questions left, which is a new one that I've just started asking people because I've committed to creating a new Seek Travel Ride music playlist. If you had to pick a song which would be a theme for your tour or your style of travel, what would that song be? This could be an impossible question as well, but I feel like seeing your post on Instagram, I know that you use musical quotes a lot. So what have you got?
This answer is so easy. It would be pretty much anything from the Into the Wild soundtrack, but probably most precisely the song entitled Guaranteed. I feel like every line in that song could be a caption to my life. Particularly, like literally every line, but especially the line, consider me a satellite forever orbiting. I think that is perfect.
Oh, I love it. I love that movie too.
Yeah, I mean, each line just seems perfect to me. Like, on bended knee is no way to be free, but especially consider me a satellite forever orbiting is, I think, the most appropriate and perfect line that I've ever heard.
Okay, it is added there. I love it. I love that that's the song that you've chosen too. Helen, the last 2 questions, and I ask this of all my guests. It'll be interesting to hear what your answers are on this one, actually. The first one is, if you are given the choice one day that you will be cycling up a perpetual hill climb, or alternatively, you can choose to cycle into a constant headwind, which one are you going to choose?
I feel like this is a really obvious answer. I'd be amazed if anybody doesn't answer that they would want the hill climb over the headwind. Does anybody choose headwind?
Can I just say, in my number of guests now, and I'm approaching 40 of them, I think I've had 3 people choose the wind.
Madness. Absolute madness.
I know.
At least with the hill, you're buying yourself some downhill. Headwinds are just unfair.
Yeah, and it's sort of like the effort you have to put into them. The best answer I had was actually from one of my very first guests. Florence Cattell, and her reason for choosing the headwind was that she knows that it's another reason that reminds her that she's alive. So she can feel the wind. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone on a bike ride trying to channel that when it's been a headwind, but I'd still choose a climb any day of the week.
Any day. And the view's probably improving with the climb. So many reasons to choose a climb.
My last question for you, Helen, and this one I feel I know the answer to, and it almost feels insignificant to someone who travels as extensively as you do, but this is the question. One day you're going to be cycling for 4 hours. Would you choose to cycle for 4 hours on your own, or would you rather cycle 4 hours with other people?
I mean, it depends the context in which this 4 hours arrives. Like if I've just come from like 2 weeks of crossing a desert on my own, then I would choose to cycle with other people. But if I've been surrounded by people for a few days, then I would absolutely savor being on my own for 4 hours. So there's no solid answer to that question. It would be the opposite to whatever I've spent the last week or two doing.
Oh, I will accept that because you have prefaced it to being the opposite of what you're generally doing. I like that. So you would either seek solitude if you've been around people and you need your alone time, or if you've been on your own, you just want to be with people. I will accept that as an answer.
Okay, cool.
Helen Dainty, it has been an absolute pleasure to spend time with you, to hear you talk about your story. It has filled me with a sense of deep wanderlust. It has given me a new perspective on countries I've not yet travelled to. And I am excited to follow your future adventures and see what's ahead of you in this bicycle nomad, global hobo touring style. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for the time and all the thoughtful questions. I've really enjoyed this.
It's been brilliant. Thank you. I was absolutely captivated with my conversation with Helen there, and it felt so special to be able to share time with someone who has travelled so extensively in this manner. I knew when I set out to record this episode it would be impossible to go through absolute every detail of each country that Helen has travelled through. What I would definitely invite you to do is to check out the links that I'm posting in my show notes so that you can actually look and support Helen and actually go through those details of different countries and tours and see what it's been like for her experiencing this on the road. And I give Helen an extra special thank you there as well. If you're enjoying listening to Seek Travel Ride, definitely make sure that you're following the podcast in your podcast player, because that way you will be notified when new episodes are released. And also, make sure to tell family and friends about the show too. If there's episodes that you especially love, make sure to share them and spread the word around, and let's get this show growing even more and more. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.